So my name is Steve Clayton. As Piers said, I work at Microsoft. I've been there about 14 years, and I have a job. They basically pay me to do my hobby. I moved from our UK operation about 2 years ago to the headquarters in Seattle, and I get to roam around this enormous company of 90,000 people that are building what I think is amazing technology. I'm a geek at heart. My background is kind of technology, and slowly I've moved away from technology. And now my job is to run around this company, find amazing people building the future of technology, and then go and speak to people like you guys about it and write a blog about it. And every 2 weeks, I check my bank account, and they still pay me to do it. It's like, so I think we're recording this. We're not going to show it to my boss, but yeah, they pay me to do my hobby. It's terrific. So I want to spend a little bit of time talking to you about a trend that we're seeing both inside of Microsoft but also outside the industry, something that we call natural user interfaces, but we love our acronyms, so we call it NUI, N-U-I. And really talk to you about, we've spent a long time as a technology industry, over 30 years at Microsoft, putting more and more technology into people's lives. And now we're starting to realize, actually, the goal should be to make technology invisible, to make technology fade away. So I'd like to spend a little bit of time just talking to you about that. I want you to sort of pause for a moment and project ahead to where the future might lie. And these are some of the areas of the future that we're trying to build at Microsoft. This world where we believe every surface will become a digital display. Any surface in your house, your kitchen table, your walls, the inside of the glass in your shower in the morning might be a place where in the future you'll read PSFK, heaven forbid, while you're standing in the shower. But we think every surface is going to become a digital display that you can not only display onto, but interact with. We also see this world where information starts to flow into our world, and technology begins to anticipate what it is we're about to do. And the scenario being depicted on the third tile here is one that, imagine being able to walk back into your workroom tomorrow, into your office, whether that's at work or at home. And all of the information that you were curating and gathering yesterday, the conversations that maybe you were having online, all of that gets populated on the walls in the room or on the surfaces in the room. As you have a conversation with colleagues, maybe it's about GDP or demographics or big data, some of the things Robert talked about. Instead of having to go and search for the information to support that conversation, it literally just appears on the surfaces in the room, is curated from the web automatically. We see this world where rooms become intelligent participants in a conversation rather than just a place you go. And then this tile in the middle, one of the areas that we're doing research around, we have a group called Microsoft Research. It's 850 of the smartest people I've ever met in my life, and they get free rein to work on pretty much anything they would like from a technology point of view. And one of the things that they've been working on is contact lens technology. And specifically, so I'm not talking about Terminator-style contact lenses here. That's still a little bit further away, because putting displays into a contact lens introduces heat, and the last thing you want near your eyes is heat. But one of the things that we think we can really kind of address with this type of technology is diabetes. People who suffer from type 1 diabetes have to prick their finger every day and take blood out of their finger and check their blood glucose levels. It turns out the other place in the body where you can measure blood glucose levels is through the teardrops. So in collaboration with the University of Washington, some of our researchers have developed a contact lens that literally can read the blood sugar level through teardrops and then transmit that to another device. So those are the kind of things that we're dreaming up in our labs. I just wanted to give you a quick kind of sense of some of the trends that I'm seeing. I literally get to explore Microsoft every day, run around our labs, knock on doors, open doors, and say, what the hell's going on in here, and then show it to the world. And these are some of the trends that I am seeing, that some of them are very obvious. Social computing and cloud computing, ubiquitous connectivity are all things that we're all very familiar with. But I want to talk a little bit about a couple of these that maybe people are less familiar with. This idea of computers everywhere, the explosion of data, which Robert talked about earlier on, pervasive displays, and how they lead us to this world of natural user interfaces. Computers really are everywhere in our lives now, and I don't just mean smartphones or PCs or slates or tablet devices or iPads or Macs or whatever you might think of traditionally as a computer. If you could kind of step back and think about where are computers in your life, I'm not going to ask anybody to answer this question because it's a fairly obvious answer. It turns out you have way more than 100 computers in your life. You think about things at home like your appliances, your washing machine, your refrigerator, your heating system. Your car, if you have a relatively modern car, has well over 100 computers in that car. So we're starting to get a huge amount more intelligent just from the daily objects in our lives that have computing. And increasingly, we're starting to connect those objects together. In the future, cars will talk to digital streets. In the future, our washing machines will talk to other appliances in the house. So we're generating a huge amount of data from these computers. But we've introduced a massive amount of complexity in our lives. So hopefully everyone can make out what this is. It's the front dial of a washing machine. My wife doesn't think I know what this is, but I do know what this is. I just don't interact with it very often. But it stands as a perfect example of how we've just made things way too complex. There are hundreds and hundreds of varieties of things you can do with the washing machine. And I don't know about you, but what I want to do with a washing machine is get my clothes washed. I don't care the spin cycle or whether it's wool or cotton or dry clothes or light. This is the dial you need on your washing machine. And that's the future where we're going to get to with technology, because it turns out you can put lots of computers into a washing machine. One of the sensors that you all probably have in your phones, you have a light sensor on your phone, and that determines the brightness of the screen. They don't cost very much. You could put one of those things inside the tumble, inside of a washing machine, and when you put the clothes in, that light sensor can detect whether it's dark clothes or light clothes. So in fact, we probably don't even need this dial in the future. The point is that we can start to make technology much more intuitive, much more natural, start to remove some of the complexity around technology. All of these devices in our lives are creating this massive explosion of data, and you heard Robert talk about this much more eloquently than I will this morning. And the answer to this question, again, I'm not going to ask anybody to shout out the answer, I'll give you the answer for the purposes of speed. How much data being generated every day would fill, or how many smartphones would it fill? The answer, it turns out, for this one is 300 million. Imagine 300 million smartphones stacked up. We're generating enough data every day to fill those phones. It's an enormous amount of data. But what we can start to do is derive much more intelligence from that data. And it turns out that the irony of all of that computing in our lives is going to make our computing experiences much more simple, as we can build experiences that use data, that can learn about us, that can anticipate our needs. And I'll talk a little more about that. Displays everywhere is probably one of my favorite topics to explore inside of Microsoft. There's a huge amount of work going on around display technology. And this is not to say that Microsoft is not going to get in the business of building televisions, but what we do believe is that we do foresee this future where literally every surface, kitchen tables, the surface I have here, sidewalks, the side of buildings, will become digital displays that we can interact with. And the video I'm going to show you is one of the guys in our research labs, a guy called Stephen Batich. I met Stevie, he's known as Stevie B. I met him a couple of years ago, and it was quite a depressing experience. First of all, because Stevie, I think, is 34 years old. And you meet the guy and you realize that he's just a genius with technology. And I'm 39 years old, and I feel like I've wasted my life when I go and speak with guys like Stevie. But I'm just going to run this video and explain to you a little bit what's going on. Stevie is him and his team are trying to build a set of displays, a set of technology that they call the magic window. They have this vision in the future that you will just have a wall in your home and you will click your fingers and that will turn into a display into somewhere else in the world. So what he's showing you here is he has a display on the left. It's called a transparent OLED. It's an organic light emitting diode display, but it's a transparent display, so we can actually see through the display. So on the right-hand side, you can see his hand being recognized, and he's not touching the screen, but the screen can see his hand. So we're building technology. We have displays that not only can display, but can see. And the example he's just shown here, he's held up an object that's kind of like a pencil with a small barcode on the end. And the screen can see that pencil and interact and react with it, and in this case, burns out the Post-it notes. And then see what he does with this Post-it note. Puts it on the screen, and the screen can see the Post-it note and then display the Post-it note. And that's a dramatically different world of display technology than where we are right now. Stevie and his team are building this thing that literally they call the magic window. And in a few years' time, based on the work these guys are doing, my family are all back in the UK. I will have a wall in my home, and I literally will click my fingers, and it will be a window into their world. But this isn't going to be the small periscope that we look down of a webcam today, where we see a very narrow view of each other's world. This is going to be a window where I can walk around and look into that world, and I'll get perspective, and I'll be able to look at objects, and I'll see things in 3D, and I'll be able to draw on that glass, and the people on the other side will be able to draw on that glass with me. It's going to get us to this point where we sometimes talk about it as the holodeck from Star Trek, the ability to almost put yourself in another place in the world in a very natural physical way. So a little bit more on this idea of natural user interfaces and how we're going to get there. Hopefully some of you are familiar with this piece of technology, the Kinect sensor. This is a product that we released about 18 months ago. Originally designed, or really its design was to be a gaming and entertainment device. And there are now 18 million of these devices in the world, hopefully in some of your homes. The thing I want to point out about this is not to try and sell you Kinect, is that the capability in this thing, it costs $150. And the things that I pointed out here, the microphones, the tilt on this, it has a motorized tilt. It has a set of cameras in there, cameras that can see in 3D, cameras that can recognize my body. I can stand in front of it and play games and dance, and it literally recognizes and maps my skeleton. The point of this is that we've now got technology that's starting to take on lots of the capabilities that we have as humans. This thing can recognize me. If I walk into my room, it logs me onto the system because it knows it's me. It can recognize me. It can hear me. I'll give you an explanation in a moment. I can talk to my television. I no longer have to interact with my television with a set of remote controls. But the point here is that we have now this increasing amount of technology on our lives that has human-like capabilities. It can see, it can hear, it can recognize, and it can understand. And we're being able to start to build much more natural user interfaces based on that. And the work that's gone on recently inside of Xbox is an example of that. You know, the experience that we've all had for the last 20 years, if we want to change a TV channel or find a movie, the experience in my household is you go and pick up at least 2 remote controls, one for the television, one for the Comcast box. And then you have to search through this convoluted interface to find what it is you're looking for. And that's nuts. The controller I have in my house now is me. It's my voice. I sit in front of my television and I say, Xbox Bing Harry Potter. And it instantly comes back with Harry Potter movies, Harry Potter music, Harry Potter games that I can play on it. So we're going away from this world of having to fumble and fight with technology to having technology start to recognize us, to understand us, and to have this much more natural experience with technology. I'm going to show you an example of where that technology is being used to create a virtual dressing room environment. So this is a video, sadly, of me at the Consumer Electronics Show back in January. Using a partner of ours, a company called Facecake, and they built an application called Swivel. And it starts to show you the kind of things that you can do outside of the gaming and the entertainment world with this Kinect sensor capability. So basically what you see here as the video starts is, you can't quite see it, but beneath the television there's a Kinect sensor. You can just see the shadow. And this is a virtual dressing room experience. So this sensor can see me, it can recognize my body, it can paint it onto the screen, and then I can stand in front of the screen and choose a shirt, a jacket, a tie, and it paints them onto my body in a very natural way. Yes, I tried on a dress. I've got nothing to announce here today, but I tried on a dress. This actually is another project, completely different project inside of Microsoft called the printing dress. That maybe we can come and talk about some other time, or search for it on the web. It's an exploration of where does technology and fashion come together. So this dress has a keyboard on the bodice, and when you type on the keyboard, the tweets that you type get projected onto the surface of the dress, which is kind of an interesting project. Then I want to show you, this is a project that we showcased for the first time a couple of weeks ago in Microsoft. It's in our research lab, so this isn't something that you're going to go and buy next week, and maybe not even next year. But it will give you an example of some of the areas where we're exploring what can you do with these smart sensors and cameras and display technology. So this project's called a Lumacher. And I'll explain very quickly what's going on. You've got this guy here, Sasha, who came up with this concept, and then a colleague of his who's sat behind him. And what Sasha's doing is he has what looks like a desktop lamp above him, and his colleague has one that looks very similar. Turns out this is a little bit more than a lamp. In that lamp, there's a set of lights, obviously. He has just a piece of paper on his table that's being lit by the lamp. But also in the lamp is a projector and a camera. And see what happens when you put these two things together. I'll let them show a couple more examples and then explain a little bit what's going on. So he's going to take some playing cards, put them down, and he's going to have a remote game of cards with his friend. His friend's going to put his cards down. And then he's going to put a physical object down. So he rolls some dice, and Sasha sees the dice. But he could be rolling those dice on the other side of the world. He could be sat in the same conference room, in a different conference room, in a different country. But it's creating this very natural way to interact with people. It looks incredibly simple. I saw this myself and played with it myself for the first time a few weeks ago. And it's deceptively simple. You literally sit down at a table, there's a piece of paper, you draw, and then somebody somewhere else in the world is drawing on your piece of paper. It's quite an unnatural experience, but it becomes natural very quickly. And they also demonstrated a version of this that works on whiteboards. So imagine you're in a conference room and you're drawing on a whiteboard, and as you draw, somebody else, somewhere else in the world, their stuff starts to appear on the whiteboard at the same time. And it creates this just amazing new way to do collaboration in a very, very natural way. There's some very fancy technology behind this that makes it work. It turns out there are some tricky technical problems, because if you start to break this down and think about it, you have to solve the problem where whatever Sasha is projecting on the left is then being projected on the right. But how do you then stop the stuff that is being projected from his desk being projected back to him? And you get this thing that's called video echo effect. So there's some very sophisticated technology that goes on to solve that. And then the final example I'm going to show you is a video, another one of our researchers called Benko. His name's Hervé Benko, but we all call him Benko. And he and another guy, Andy Wilson, have been exploring for a long time how do you start to use display technology? How do you create 3D environments? How can you use things like these depth cameras, these 3D cameras, to create completely different experiences with technology? So this is one of their most recent projects. It's called the wearable projector. And again, I'll let the video run in the background. It'll become pretty apparent quickly what's going on here. So clearly, this isn't something you're going to buy in the shop anytime soon. I don't think people are going to walk around with this thing on their shoulder, but the intention being that this technology, like all technology, will get shrunk down relatively quickly. So he has a projector and a version of a Kinect sensor on his shoulder. And what happens is a blue dot appears on any surface in front of him, and you'll see in a moment he'll literally hold his hand out and a blue dot will appear on his hand, and he'll tap the dot and his hand turns into an interface. So this starts to get us towards that point where I said any surface can become a digital display. I'll give you an example of where, so literally he holds out a paper pad, and that paper pad becomes something he can paint on. It's not very sophisticated from an interface point of view at the moment, but it demonstrates the principle that we've now got this technology that literally does let you turn any surface into a digital display. One way I thought about using this literally dawned on me yesterday. I was walking around New York, I pull out my phone and I want to get from A to B, and then I spend the next 10 minutes walking along the street like this, sort of bumping into people. With this technology in the future, I'll be able to walk along the street, and on the street I'll just have arrows projected. Turn left, Steve, turn right, go this way. And it sounds ridiculous, but that potential, that capability is there. And then you can start to combine that with things like social networking, your Twitter feeds, your Facebook feeds. So I'll be able to walk down the street, and when I turn left, it will say, actually, Piers really recommends a bar just around this corner, so you might want to take a diversion and turn right around here. And we'll start to get this sort of blending. We like to talk about it as the blending of the digital world and the physical world, and we're starting to see that happen much more dramatically. So what does all of this mean? Just there was a quick kind of race through some of the technologies, some of the things that we're working on at Microsoft. And if you like this kind of stuff, I'll give a shameless promotion for the blog. If you go to microsoft.com/next, we are putting these kind of videos, this type of content up there and showcasing it pretty much on a weekly basis. But what does this all mean? Where is this leading to? It's leading to a world where technology does become much more intuitive, where you can sit in front of your television and not have to fumble with remote controls. You can drive the television with the most natural controller you have in your life, which is you, your voice. Technology starts to become more and more invisible. Very simple example. I went home to the UK for the holidays, and I wanted to play a driving game on Xbox with my dad. And those of you who've got Xbox, you'll be familiar with the Xbox controller. And it's quite a sophisticated controller because you have to have lots of different buttons and functions for some of the games you might play. So I sit down with my dad and I say, hey Dad, do you want to play this new driving game? He's like, yeah, I'd love to. My dad's driven for 45 years. He knows how to drive. But if I give him an Xbox controller, he has no clue how to drive. So he's actually embarrassed by the fact that he can't use this technology, he can't participate. But now I can say to him, well, Dad, you know how to drive? And he's like, yeah, I put my hands up like this and I drive. And that's all he needs to do. Because we now have this sensor beneath the television that can see him, can recognize when he's doing this, and make the car react in that way. Technology, the data that we have, all of this massive amounts of 300 million smartphones worth of data that we're gathering every day, that's starting to enable technology to anticipate what it is we're about to do. It's starting to allow technology to work on our behalf. I'll give you a very simple example, kind of a shameless plug for our search engine, Bing. If you go to bing.com right now and go to the search box and type in flight 2 and then put stop there, and literally as you type flight 2, Bing is going to guess what you're about to do next. It knows where you are, so it's going to say, well, he's going to take a flight from New York because we know where he is. You don't have to type in flight from New York. The technology knows where you are. We have that capability already in all of our technology. And then as you type in flight 2 and you press the letter S, It's going to guess that you're about to search for a flight to San Francisco. And in well under a second, it will mine a couple of million previous transactions, and it will tell you, even before you've hit enter and gone to the results page, it will predict what the price of that flight is going to be, and it will also give you a visual indicator of whether the price of that flight is going up or going down. And when you think about the amount of work that happened in under a second to get you that result, it's because we've got this massive amount of data that we can start to tap into, that we can use to arguably predict the future. So that's where we think all of this is going. I want to play one final example, which is, I'll ask the guys to play the audio file, and then I'll explain what's going on.
Xbox.
That's the sound of a 2-year-old, my 2-year-old, my daughter, Alberta. And it's amazing when you look at how quickly we've come with technology and how her generation is going to grow up just expecting technology to be natural. So I'll give you a little story of what happened in my house. She's now 2.5. 6 months ago, I recorded this file because this is what happened. We're stood in the Clayton household. We have a kind of open plan apartment thing in Seattle. And around about 6 o'clock is dinner time in the Clayton household. But my daughter doesn't care because she's watching TV. She's watching Netflix, streamed through the Xbox. And if she had her way, it would be all Barney, all the time, 24 hours a day. So Barney's blaring out to the television, the cuddly purple dinosaur. So my wife says, switch the television off. It's time for dinner. So I start fumbling around for the controls, and I finally find the control for the TV, only to realize that the batteries have run out. So I'm frantically trying to switch the television off and get my daughter to come and concentrate and sit down for dinner. And then I realized, well, I can just control this thing with my voice. So I said, Xbox, pause. And Barney paused. And then what happened was a magical and maybe a scary moment is my 2-year-old looked up at me, looked at the television, and said, Xbox play. And the television played. So I said, no, Xbox pause. Xbox play. Switch the television off manually. That was the only thing I could do. But then what happened, the next bit is even more fascinating. So my daughter then walks into the kitchen and she looks at the microwave. And to a 2-year-old, a microwave looks just like a television. And you know where this is going. She looks at the microwave and says, Xbox play. And gets really pissed off when the microwave won't play Barney for her. But that's kind of the world we're going to, where our interactions with technology are just going to become so much more natural and so much more seamless. And I think the delightful irony of all of this is we're going to get to this more natural technology because we've spent the last 30 years investing in putting lots of technology in our lives. So it's that complexity that's actually going to lead to more simplicity. So I'll leave you with that thought, and thanks for your laughter. Thank you.